Hi everyone, my name is Liam Newlands and my talk is called getting your mind in shape by getting your body in shape. So everyone already knows just how important exercise is for you. There's been countless advertisements, promotions, even scheduled periods in school called daily physical activity. So why then is exercise still so neglected amongst youth? Well, some of the more popular excuses, and excuses that I've even used myself, are I just have too much work to do, or I'm too tired to go today, or even I'm just too lazy, I don't want to. So it seems as though students really place exercise sort of low on their priority list. However, something that all students place high on their priority list is their studies. And so I'm here today to talk about how exercise extends beyond just physical fitness, and it is something students really care about, their minds. I would even go as far as to say that exercise will actually make you a better student. But how does it do this? Well, one of the most important aspects of being a student is mental health. In university, especially here at McMaster, there are countless mental health initiatives to both promote awareness as well as provide opportunities to seek help. And exercise serves as a sort of preemptive defense for mental health. In fact, in comparisons between those who exercise and those who don't, vast differences in mood can be seen. And in 1999, Fox demonstrated that both aerobic and resistance exercise training can enhance mood states. Now, you're probably wondering, how exactly does this work? Well, I'm sure you've all heard of the term runner's high before. But interestingly enough, you don't actually have to run to get this feeling of euphoria. In fact, any type of acute exercise will do. Now, acute exercise is really just any kind of exercise that gets your heart rate going. So anything that gets you hyped up and your heart's beating quickly. So, with acute exercise, you have a release of endogenous opioids. Now, these are just opioids that are released in the brain, specifically in the pituitary gland. And the most important of these is beta endorphin. Now, when you get beta endorphin released in your blood, it can be linked to different physiological and psychological changes, such as enhanced mood states, exercise-induced euphoria, and even altered pain perception. So, the nerve tissues of the brain and spinal cord make up your central nervous system, while the nerve tissues everywhere else make up your peripheral nervous system. And in your peripheral nervous system, we get the binding of these opioids to the opioid receptor, as you can see here. And this results in a cascade of events into which there is an inhibition of the pain transmission proteins. Now, if the pain transmission proteins are inhibited and not produced, as you can see here, then we're going to have a reduced sense of pain. Now, in the central nervous system, we get the same binding of the opioid receptor. However, this time, it inhibits GABA. Now, GABA is really just an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and its job is to inhibit dopamine. And when dopamine is produced, we get an increased feeling of pleasure. So if we're inhibiting GABA, then we're going to have excess dopamine produced, and thus increased pleasure. So, how is this going to benefit us other than just feeling great and feeling awesome? Well, luckily, research has shown that increased mood actually raises productivity. And Oswald, Proto, and Scroy demonstrated this in 2009 by showing participants a comedy clip, or not showing them a comedy clip, and then having them perform a numerical addition task for money afterwards. Now, if you look at this graph here, you can see reported happiness is on the y-axis, rated on a 7-point scale, and we have our treatment condition on the x-axis. And the data from these just show that the comedy clip worked. It made them feel happier for the most part. However, what gets really interesting is when you look at this graph. So we have the number of correct additions on the y-axis, and again, the treatment condition on the x-axis. And when you look at these data, you can see that those that were treated with the comedy clip and actually felt happier performed better. So this is something that everyone can relate to, because when you're feeling down, probably the last thing you want to do is work. But if you're feeling happy, I mean, you probably still don't want to work, but you're definitely going to be a lot more willing to, and more passionate about it too. So we've seen how exercise can benefit our cognitive function indirectly through alterations in mood, but it can also do so directly, and that's through attention and concentration. Now, Bud and Al in 2008 demonstrated this by looking at participants' performance on a test of attention and concentration. And they did so after 10 minutes of a normal school lesson, 10 minutes of coordinative exercise, or 10 minutes of a normal sports lesson. Now, coordinative exercise is really just any kind of exercise that requires coordination. So a good example would be if you bounce a basketball with your right hand and a volleyball with your left hand at the same time. For the normal sports condition, they were just instructed to exercise at a moderate intensity, to keep the intensity sort of the same. And what the results of this study showed was doing any kind of exercise at all actually increased your performance on a test of attention and concentration. So this is really cool, but exercise can even extend into physiological changes in the brain. So in 2011, Erickson et al. Demonstrated this, and they demonstrated that doing aerobic exercise can actually increase the size of your anterior hippocampus. Now, your hippocampus is a region of the brain that's responsible for memory, with the anterior hippocampus being specifically responsible for spatial memory. And so if you have changes in your anterior hippocampus, you're going to have changes in your spatial memory ability. So if you look at these graphs, we have data on the left hemisphere of the brain and the right hemisphere of the brain, and the hippocampus on each side. We have the volume of each hippocampus on the y-axis, and we have the time in each condition on the x-axis. So the one condition was exercising for 3 days per week, and the other condition was stretching or toning for 3 days per week. And when you look at the results of these data, you can see that those who exercised, their hippocampus actually increased in size. Now this is amazing because it means all of these people, just from exercising, are going to have an increased ability for spatial memory. So that's really cool. And with all that being said, exercising between or before classes would be a great way for students to get the most out of their educational experience. We've all had those days where we don't quite feel 100%, whether you can't retain information, you can't remember things, or you can't focus, or even you just feel kind of down. It makes it a lot harder to be an effective learner and thus an effective student. So why not combat this with exercise? Finally, I'm going to go ahead and say that any amount of exercise is worth it. It doesn't matter if you have 2 hours for the gym or you can only squeeze in 30 minutes in between classes. Doing something is better than doing nothing, and students especially should be taking advantage of the increased memory, attention, and even mood benefits that come with exercise. Keeping your body in shape is important, but it's just as important to keep your mind in shape. Thank you.